Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're going to demystify the entire corporate turnaround process and give you a tactical survival guide for struggling businesses. If you've ever wondered how companies actually pull themselves back from the brink of total collapse, well, you are definitely in the right place. We're going to break down the exact frameworks that experts use to literally bring a business back to life.
All right, let's kick things off with a pretty provocative question. Is your business slowly failing without you even knowing it? It's kind of like that old analogy of the frog in the pot of water that's slowly brought to a boil. A lot of companies completely fail to see the danger that is building up right under their noses. It's incredibly common for leaders to just mistake the early subtle symptoms of a fatal decline for, just another rough quarter. But here's the reality. The faster you acknowledge there's an actual problem, the more time you have to fix it.
To pull this off, we're going to treat our struggling business exactly like a patient in a high-stakes medical rescue. We'll be following 5 clear phases: diagnosing the distress, stopping the bleeding, executing the turnaround strategy, communicating the plan, and finally, rebuilding for growth.
So let's jump straight into phase 1, diagnosing the distress, or reading the vital signs. This is all about identifying those invisible threats that are slowly draining your company.
There is a critical distinction we need to make right off the bat between revenue loss and revenue leakage. Revenue loss? Well, that happens outside your doors. You lose a big client, or maybe the market takes a nosedive. It's painful, but it's obvious, right? But revenue leakage? That is sneaky. That is money you actually earned, but you simply failed to collect because of a missed renewal, a pricing error, or some unbilled usage. It's entirely internal, and it's incredibly dangerous because it just hides right there inside your existing revenue streams. And here's the real kicker. Unchecked revenue leakage can silently eat up 1 to 5% of your EBITDA every single year before you even realize it's happening. I mean, think about that. That can easily be hundreds of thousands, literally maybe even millions of dollars, slipping through the cracks of outdated contracts and manual billing processes. By the time your auditors finally catch these mistakes at the end of the year, that cash is long gone. No way to get it back. So, how do we pinpoint exactly where a company stands? We use something called the Altman Z-Score. It's this heavy-hitting financial formula designed by NYU Professor Edward Altman. It combines 5 key financial ratios, measuring everything from your liquidity to profitability to give us a definitive, unbiased diagnosis. It tells us whether a company is in the safe zone, the gray area, or in critical distress. For example, if you're a public manufacturing company and your score drops below 1.81, there is no sugarcoating it. You are officially in the distress zone. You don't have time to wait and see anymore. You have a high likelihood of near-term insolvency. Which brings us to phase 2, stopping the bleeding, our emergency cash flow triage. Once we know the patient is in that distress zone, we have to immediately stop the bleeding and regain control over our cash. Time is absolutely your enemy here. The absolute star of this stabilization phase is the 13-week cash flow model, or TWCF for short. Think of this as your financial life support monitor. When a company is quite literally gasping for air, you cannot look at annual or even quarterly projections anymore. You need to know exactly what cash is coming in and what cash is going out on a highly granular weekly basis. This model is what determines if a company can survive out of court or if it's going to be forced straight into bankruptcy. Now, the crucial thing to understand here is that a properly built TWCF rolls forward these specific components week by week. It exposes exactly when you will run out of cash, and it proves to your stakeholders that you actually have a credible survival plan. Accrued wages, for instance, are often your largest disbursement, while your accounts receivable might be your fastest source of incoming cash. You map all of this out, along with your available credit or your borrowing base, to see exactly how much runway you have left to work with. All right, the patient is stabilized, the bleeding has stopped. Now, phase 3, the turnaround strategy, surgical execution. We've bought ourselves a little time. Now we've got to get in there and fix the root causes. This surgical procedure really comes down to 3 decisive steps. First, rapid cost efficiency. You go for the quick wins, cutting the fat, tightening up travel policies, reducing unused software to instantly boost cash flow. Second, asset retrenchment. You have to cut the muscle that just isn't working, selling off old assets or shutting down unprofitable service lines that are just draining you. Finally, you take whatever resources you have left and you hyper-focus them on your core. You pivot your entire operation to focus strictly on the products and customers that actually make money. But listen, a turnaround will absolutely fail if you try to fix 15 things at once. It just won't work. You must relentlessly follow the 3 to 5 rule.
That means identifying only your top 3 to 5 highest impact priorities for the next 90 days. And here's the secret sauce. You assign one single accountable owner to each priority. If a task is owned by the leadership team or a committee, trust me, it won't get done. Every single high-impact priority needs exactly one name attached to it with a hard deadline. This forces accountability and breaks that notorious bottleneck of the founder trying to do everything themselves. And to actually fund this surgery, well, you might need to bypass those rigid, traditional bank loans and look into flexible, non-bank financing. When your financials look terrible on paper, a traditional bank is probably going to freeze your lines of credit. But asset-based lenders, they look at the equity you have in your equipment, your inventory, or the invoices owed to you by credit-worthy customers. They can give you that vital injection of cash when you need it the absolute most.
Now, surgery is incredibly stressful for everyone involved. That brings us to phase 4, communicating the plan. Let's talk about bedside manner, because the human element in this rescue is absolutely crucial.
There's a great quote here that perfectly captures why proactive, deeply honest communication is an absolute must from leadership. You have to overcome the negligence or the denial that caused the crisis in the very first place. Look, when a business is struggling, rumors spread like wildfire. If leadership just goes quiet, stakeholders will automatically assume the absolute worst. You have to get ahead of the narrative with a confident, transparent message that acknowledges reality, but also clearly presents your plan for survival.
To manage all this effectively, you've got to build a solid communication matrix. You must tailor a transparent, two-way dialogue with each of these distinct stakeholder groups to prevent panic and, frankly, to build essential trust. For example, if you enter a small business restructuring process over in Australia, creditors holding at least 50% of your debt value actually have to approve your plan for it to proceed. You literally need their buy-in. At the same time, you've got to reassure your employees who are terrified about their jobs and your suppliers who are worried about ever getting paid. Empathy and transparency here aren't just nice to have. They are critical strategic necessities.
Okay, our patient has survived the crisis. We're moving into phase 5, rebuilding for growth. This is all about rehabilitation and scale. We aren't just going back to the way things were. We are building something much, much better. If you check out this timeline, you'll see pretty quickly that turnarounds are definitely not overnight miracles. But following this structured cadence proves to everyone that there is a realistic light at the end of the tunnel. In the first month, you're just stopping the bleeding and getting cash visibility. By month 2, you should be hitting those early operational wins. But honestly, it takes a full 3 to 6 months to truly embed these new habits, and up to a year before your foundation is strong enough to start safely scaling your volume again. As you start to institutionalize these changes, your ultimate vital sign of a successful rehab is your net income. You want to push past that standard 10% and aim for a robust 20% profitability. A 5% net income, that just means you are barely surviving, and you're highly vulnerable to whatever the next market shock is. Hitting that 20% mark, though, means your turnaround was a resounding success, and you've built real sustainable value. And I'm going to leave you with this final thought to take away from our explainer today. Are you settling for merely keeping your head above water? Or are you utilizing these strategic tools to build a powerhouse ready for whatever the market throws at it next? A crisis is terrible to endure, for sure, but it's also this incredible opportunity to strip away the inefficiencies and rebuild your company the right way. Thank you so much for joining me, and hey, keep looking for those silent leaks before they sink the ship.